From ESPN, Ed Earhart and Michael Smith. With Hill Holliday's Tyler Hissey.
Actually, this chair.
There? I'm sorry. Different chair.
Yo, so wait, I gotta say something. Because this is the only my mind works like this. Am I wearing the same shirt in that picture? Damn, that's embarrassing. I got a much more expensive wardrobe than this. You know, I guess I sometimes just kind of get stuck on certain combinations. Do I at least look all right? All right. Man, that's messed up.
The good thing is,
we got to help you with wardrobe allowance.
Yeah. Hey, can I get that in writing, please?
the good thing is we'll get to see you on TV this week. Hopefully, you're wearing a different shirt.
Yeah, I think I will.
Take your word for it.
Doggone
But thanks so much for being here today. And Ed, I wanted to start with you. How has the emergence of social media and really content for multiple screens impacted how ESPN programs the network overall?
Well, I think you saw a lot of it there, of course, whether it be what we do in studio or what we do in live games and how we think about engaging with fans. I will say that when we first started down this journey as it related to social media, there was no question that our talent, our brands, ESPN, SportsCenter, College Game Day, all of those brands had tremendous followings and tremendous interest and increasingly tremendous engagement. But we were somewhat disorganized in terms of how we actually went about it. And I think a lot of what we spent the last year and a half doing, which is why you see the kind of numbers you see today, is we programmed how we would program, if that's the right way to put it. And that was we began to tree up by sport each one of the different elements of ESPN's programming social strategy, so that the NFL all treed up, or college football, or the NBA. And it allowed us to do two things. One, create great scale as it related to how advertisers might want to participate. And most importantly, it created scale amongst the conversation about how people followed ESPN and allowed our talent, our shows, to build that audience as well. So it had a double value, and it really worked.
How closely did the social content teams at ESPN, let's say Baseball Tonight, work with the producers of that program to make sure that the messaging on the social channels is aligned with the messaging on air?
Hand in glove. Hand in glove. I mean, it's just core, and Michael will obviously talk a little bit about how it happens with Numbers Never Lie, but that's become one of the most coveted jobs at ESPN, is if you're the social programming production person, you got a great job, because you're able to sit between both television, obviously, and what we're doing in the social environment.
So ESPN obviously has tremendous scale across multiple platforms, great TV mobile app as well. How have advertisers been able to integrate into ESPN programming, not just in traditional means, but across social media and multiple screens?
Well, I would say this much. There isn't an RFP that we don't get today that doesn't have, we need a social application. We need a social element. That's just kind of table stakes now, regardless of what it is. The other part, multimedia, has been a long time thing that ESPN's been a leader in. Now it's multimedia, and that includes, of course, social. We did something which we might want to show here with one of Hill's longtime clients, and that's Dunkin' Donuts, around Monday Night Football's Field Pass. And I raise this one partially because the folks at Hill were kind enough to invite us to be here, and thank you. But also it's a great example of taking an existing television idea and bringing the social engagement into it and then helping drive it across the board. So, you know, this is the way that our guys in Monday Night Countdown, which is the show that ESPN does just prior to Monday night, introduced and brought in the hashtag with Duncan involved in it, and how our guys set it up before the game and used it. If we go to the next slide, by engaging them. This was the kind of involvement we had from fans once we used, again, that television environment to start. Tremendous involvement all year long. The next slide, please. And this gives you just a little bit of a sense of how that worked over the course of a year. One thing I will say that we're really spending some time on is just having followers or just having tweets is one thing. We're really spending a lot of our time on retweeting and on sharing and on who's reading. And we're working very closely with Social Intelligence, whom I think many of you know, which I think is the Nielsen kind of TV ratings group, as Bluefin becomes more of a Twitter sales tool, and Nielsen and Social Intelligence becomes more of a marketplace currency as it relates to how the industry may look at social. We think it's real important to move past just followers and tweets and move towards sharing, retweeting. That's where brands can get engaged, and that's where advertisers can get engaged.
Great. And I think another example that you guys had last fall, you partnered with Ford Fusion on a great program with Twitter, where you actually had highlights that lived within the Twitter card, so people could watch the highlights. It was all presented by Ford. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. This was during the BCS. We recognized that we could, through both the Twitter social graph and our scale, using both promoted tweets with Twitter and our own, and we worked with Twitter on this, we could deliver highlights that were relevant to college football fans in their news feeds as they were happening in real time. 7 million people viewed BCS highlights in 5 days. We created instant replays, with the SportsCenter brand being the brand that we had to live with that. Tremendously successful. We got just extraordinary positive feedback from users about, this is how I'd like to see highlights in my news feed. And I think that's the way we're looking at this for everything now, from World Cup to, of course, college football going forward, doing it with the NBA onward. We think this is just another version of SportsCenter, just happens to be the Twitter version of SportsCenter.
That's great. We'll transition over to Michael now, and we actually have a clip that will play from his new program, Numbers Never Lie.
Welcome to Numbers Never Lie. Mike Smith, as always. The numbers settle the arguments on this show. Let me channel my inner President Obama for a second. Oh my goodness. Let me be clear. Kobe should be passing the torch to Dwight, not lighting him on fire in a meeting. Dude, you know what I'm doing right now? Chilling. I'm a Lakers fan, chilling. You want to talk about statements? I'll be the Miami Heat. Let me make a statement to you. Talk to the hand. That hand that has a championship ring on one of its fingers. I want to present Kevin Durant with the first Numbers Never Lie MVP NNL. Most valuable player not named LeBron.
I don't usually talk. I usually let other people talk on the show, but thank you. It's not just me talking, so you tune in to hear Jalen Rose and Hugh Douglas talk as well.
First question for you, Michael.
Yep.
How much of an influence does kind of what's trending on Twitter on a given day influence the topics that you guys discuss and debate about each afternoon?
How much time do we have, man? I would say, in part, you know, we're aware of it. We don't walk into a morning meeting, which we would be in right now, as a matter of fact. We don't walk into a morning meeting saying, okay, what's trending on Twitter? Let's talk about that. I mean, but it does, we are aware of it. Like this morning, needless to say, Tim Tebow is trending. For those of you who somehow may not have heard, Tim Tebow was finally mercifully released by the New York Jets. So if you're not looking forward to Tim Tebow coverage on ESPN, sorry, it's going to be talked about today. You know, so that's a trending topic. So that goes hand in hand. But, you know, we're not going to always go into it saying, hey, this is trending, so let's force it into the show. What's fascinating, just from a talent standpoint, if I may kind of digress for a moment,
sure,
is just back in 2009 when a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, Jamel Hill, you may be familiar with her, convinced me to get on Twitter. Because I did MySpace. And I didn't do Facebook. So she was like, get on Twitter, it'll be fun. I'm like, I don't want to get on Twitter. But she talked me into it. And it was just that. It was fun for me. It was social. It was me kind of getting away from the sports space and just being me, whether it's about movies, music, you know, social issues, politics, whatever. Just having fun, engaging with fans. It's gone from fun to a foundational part of what I do now, just as on-air talent. Like, it's not a game. Like, there are so many different strategy meetings and coaching sessions that go on behind closed doors at ESPN about how to use Twitter properly as talent. You know, it's become part of my job, not just in terms of information and getting a gauge for what people are talking about, but how I tweet. Even my handle at one point was @undecided. Real quick story. My name is Michael Smith. As you might imagine, a lot of people have that name already. So finding a Twitter handle that kind of worked for me was difficult. So I'm sitting up there trying to find a username, and I'm like, @undecided. I tried @to be determined. There was too many characters. It was @undecided. It was available. I'm like, there you go. That's my Twitter handle. Well, a new coordinating producer took over Numbers Never Lie in last September, and he wanted me to change it. And they fought and got, you know, somebody who was just squatting on the handle @Michael Smith. So they changed my Twitter handle. We talked about how not to retweet random people so much. We talked about when to retweet, how often to retweet, because I could blow up your timeline. Like, you know, how often to retweet. All those different things are being coached, and even in terms of the right way to represent the ESPN brand. You know, it's not just about my brand as an individual, but my brand is part of ESPN's brand. So there's been so much beyond just the content of Numbers Never Lie. And we do social questions a lot. We have votes, just like every other show is doing. But it's also just when we're not on the air, how to tweet. At night, how to tweet during the draft, what hashtags to use, those types of things. So I can go on and on about how much Twitter has influenced and almost dictated how we do our jobs day in and day out. That's just Twitter, not even talking about Facebook and Instagram, for example.
How has Numbers Never Lie going after fan participation? How do you incorporate fans and kind of their opinions into the program?
Yeah, Twitter questions, votes, or just hashtags, or sometimes we'll do one of our best and most memorable shows since this reboot of Numbers Never Lie in September was, this is perfect, this comes together nicely. It was actually born from Twitter. So Jalen Rose, Fab Fiver, former NBA player, you see him all over ESPN, he's from Detroit. For some strange reason, it's the craziest tweet I can remember him ever putting out, and that's saying something. He says, Detroit's playing Chicago on Monday Night Football. Now, this is the Lions against the Bears, okay? We all know who the superior team typically is. He says, if the Lions beat the Bears, if the Bears beat the Lions, I'm going to shave my head on national television. I'm like, well, first of all, usually it's like if something wacky happens, you'll shave your head. Everybody knew the Bears were going to beat the Lions. So he said, I'm going to shave my head on national TV. So sure enough, the Bears beat the Lions on Monday Night Football. Everybody on SportsCenter picks up on it that night and the next morning. So what do? We turned the Numbers Never Lie set that you just saw into a barbershop, literally a barbershop. We had a little, stripe pole over here. We brought in a barber chair. We got a barber from Connecticut to come in. We had Jalen getting a haircut during the show with the hashtag Jalen's Shave of Shame, or it might have just been Shave of Shame as the hashtag. And sure enough, we were trending. Now, earlier, there's no clear indication that trending on Twitter increases ratings, but we know that it helps relevance. And Numbers Never Lie in its infancy is going for relevance. And this was a huge moment. So again, born from a ridiculous tweet from Jalen, but it got engagement because people were tweeting about it. It was trending. People were writing in with their comments. And it worked. It was a big hit for us. So, the idea came from Twitter. We kept it going on Twitter. It helped us with our creativity. I mean, even Kobe Bryant, that's the most recent story I could think of. That was the most fascinating thing. Kobe live tweeting the Lakers game was a big controversy. I had a problem with it, for one. I didn't like it. Sorry.
I liked it. I thought it was fantastic as a fan to see that.
Everybody is a fan, but if you're Mike D'Antoni or his teammates, you want Kobe to live tweet what you're supposed to be doing?
I would not as a teammate or a
That's
coach,
what
but
I'm saying.
From the fans' perspective, that was fantastic tweet.
Exactly. Everybody enjoyed it. It was retweeted millions of times, but that became a storyline on the talk shows the next day. So just Kobe doing something that he thought was just fun and an outlet became news. So oftentimes, not only is Twitter a source for discovering what's going on, but it drives the conversation, and it is.
And it leads to content as well.
It leads to content, exactly.
It's fantastic. You mentioned the NFL draft, and you just shared a statistic backstage, which I thought was pretty incredible. During the NFL draft the other night, you want to
Social
elaborate
intelligence put 48% of all of the usage on Twitter on Thursday night was the NFL draft.
I was responsible for 45% of that.
But I will say one thing, which I heard the folks from Hill say at the beginning, and that is that this notion of whether it's connected to television or not, I don't know if that's as it's important, but I think we've found that the notion of whether it's second screen or multiple screens, when it comes to high passion topics or genres like sports, if you've got multiple screens going all the time, whether you have the game or not, or have the program or not, I think the media's ability or the brand's ability, like ourselves or others, to engage advertisers in that conversation can only be enhanced because people are on so many different devices. So the connection back to television, while important, I think you said 78% of the people are using another device. Mm-hmm. For us, on Sunday afternoon, we don't have any NFL games at ESPN. Mm-hmm. 1 million people a minute are on something ESPN on Sunday afternoon. We have no games. So it gives you a sense, I think, of what's going on.
And just as talent, we were talking earlier, certain events like the draft, like a Sunday afternoon NFL games, like a nationally televised game involving the Heat, you'd be remiss from a personal standpoint if you didn't jump in on that conversation. It's become, almost like volunteer work, but in the big picture, it helps your individual and the larger brand of ESPN.
Great. I think we only have time for one more question, and I know this question has been discussed a lot. It may never happen, but Ed, do you think a la carte cable is ever something that's going to happen? And if it does, how does that affect kind of ESPN? You guys have an advantage with live content.
Well, I can only say that we feel very strongly that authenticated users of the television model is the business model that we support completely. As to whether or not it will happen in the future, anyone's guess is good, but the current model of providing sports fans and people that get their content through the cable relationship today is a model that we support. So I can't speculate beyond that.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.